Okay, this is the second video in a group of videos that do 20 challenges for Python. Um, this is challenge number 6 through to number 10. We're using IGCSE, Pseudocode, and we're using Python to complete these challenges. I'm using Python in idle, and you can follow along to try and complete the challenges. Right, so challenge number 6. Challenge number 6 asks the user their name. If it's the same as your name, then it outputs you're cool. Otherwise, it outputs nice to meet you, right? So it's looking for a conditional, and the condition is the name the same as the user's name? Okay, so that's the condition. And we're going to go to Python and we're going to get started. Okay, so I'm just using Python idle down here. Go to Python. Now what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to set up 5 files in a row, so that I don't keep repeating myself doing the same thing. So I'll just do this, and I've put in a comment here, and this is going to be challenge number 6. I'm actually going to go through and say file new, paste, this is going to be challenge number 7, new, paste, this is challenge 8, file, new, paste, challenge number 9, new, paste, challenge number 10. Right, now I'm just gonna save each of those. Save as. We're saving them to the desktop. This is challenge 10. Desktop, save. Then I can minimize that down. Now, the idea is that I want to be working more efficiently. I want to be working quicker. So I'm just going to be doing all of my saves right off the bat. Then I can go and work on each file really quickly. So that's one thing that I would do. Save as, this is challenge 8. Okay, to the desktop, save. To the desktop, challenge 7. Save, minimize that, and then challenge 6. Alright, file, save. To the desktop, challenge 6. Right, so I can go through and I can start working a little bit faster, a little bit more efficiently. I've got all my challenges saved. Now, we're using in here a conditional statement. And the conditional statement is, and what that means in conditional statement is, there is a condition that has to be met for something to happen. So, for example, to go snow skiing, there has to be snow. To go to the beach, there has to be sun. So there is a condition that has to be met before we can do this challenge. Right now, the challenge said, ask the user their name. So we're going to use an input, and then we're going to compare that name against the user's actual name. Now, I said to you we're also using the pseudocode. So this is the IGCSE, the official IGCSE pseudocode, and this is how we write an if statement in pseudocode. You have the if, then the condition, then we have a then statement, then we have the statement, and then we have an end if. Now, this conditional statement here is different to Python, but this is how we have to do it first for our pseudocode, because remember, the IGCSE exams are all based on pseudocode. They're not based on Python. So you need to make sure you know and understand the pseudocode. So let's go through and write our pseudocode first. Pseudocode. Okay, so let's have a look at our question. Our question says, one more time, ask the user their input, their name, right? So we're going to do an input, and the input's going to be something like, please enter your name, right? So in my brackets, inverted commas, please enter your name, colon space. Now, remember, I'm doing this as pseudocode, so I'm going to put a hash at the start, and the hash just makes it a comment so that it's not actually, this part of the program doesn't actually run. Now, the second part is we're going to put this if statement. Now, the way that they've just looked, if we just looked on the pseudocode thing, it says we have to do an if, then we do a then, and then to complete that, we're going to do an end if. All right, so that's the IGCSE pseudocode. Now, we need to, again, make sure that we're checking to see whether this variable matches something that we've got in here. So we need to input this into a variable. And I'm going to create a variable called name, and I'm going to put an equals, and then it's the input of enter your name. One thing about IGCSE pseudocode is they don't always use an equal symbol. In fact, what they normally do is they use an arrow, and the arrow points to the variable saying that this information is being put inside this variable. But for the purpose of writing this, and because I can't do arrows quickly in Python, I'm just going to use an equal sign. It actually means exactly the same thing. It's just that I'm not drawing the arrow, but you need to be aware that an arrow means allocating information into a variable. Okay, now we can get into this. If the name is exactly equal to, so if you do two equal signs here, the two equal signs means you're making a comparison between this here, which is the variable, and whatever it is you want to compare to. One equal sign means that you're allocating this information into the variable. Two equal signs means you're making a comparison between the two, right? So if the name exactly equals, and I'll use my name, so we'll do Nick. Okay, then something's going to happen. All right, so if the name is exactly equal to Nick, then we're going to output, and the output says you're cool. So let's do you're cool. You're cool. Okay, otherwise it's going to output nice to meet you. So then we could put in here an else, and then we could put in an output nice to meet you. Come on, capital letters. Okay, and I need to put a little hash in there as well. Now, one of the things you'll notice here is that my two statements inside my if and then inside my else, they're indented. Now, this is a format that's important for Python to make sure that they're indented. And what it also does is it shows that this section of code only runs if this condition is being run. Otherwise, or else, this section of code will be run, which only runs if it's going to fall into this condition. So the tab inside shows that this code is embedded within this condition, and this section of code is embedded within this condition. Okay, so that's part of being a conditional statement. So if we talk through this program again, let's have a look at it. We've got a variable called name, and we're going to get an input from the user that says, please enter your name, and they put their name in. If the name is exactly equal to Nick, then we're going to run this section of code here. Otherwise, or else, we're going to run this section of code down here, and then my if statement ends. So that's it. That should be the program for challenge 6. So now we're going to just put into Python. Please excuse me, I have a terrible cold. Okay, name equals input, nearly exactly the same as the pseudocode. Please enter your name. Colon space, close inverted commas, close brackets. And there is our input statement, really easy. Now let's do our if. Now our if is a little bit different, and you'll notice the colors are different too, right? If name is exactly equal to the string of Nick, and you'll notice it's a string because it has to be in inverted commas here, and it has to match what was in here, which is a string entry. So if name is exactly equal to Nick, then, and there's a colon at the end, not a semicolon, there's a colon at the end that goes on there. You don't need the N statement, the then statement. You just need the print, and I'll print you're cool. Okay, now let's do the else, colon. Now with the else statement, you don't need to put the condition in here. We've already said this is the condition here. Is the name equal to Nick? So anything else is going to be not equal to Nick. So you don't need to put in does not equal to Nick. If this condition is Nick, then fine, we run that. Otherwise, any other thing that's input in here will print nice to meet you. So that's the way this is going to work. Print nice to meet you. And that's it. We've written the Python. After we've written the pseudocode, you can understand the logic and work out the logic in the pseudocode. And then to just write the Python is to just put it in place. Let's save that. Let's run that program in my split screen. There we go. Please enter your name. I'll enter the wrong name to start with. Paul. And it says nice to meet you. All right, let's run it again because we always do testing to make sure that our program works. So enter your name. This time I'll put in Nick and then I'll hit enter and it says you're cool. So we can test our program here and we can see that it works. And that's it. Challenge number 6 is completed. We're going to move on to challenge number 7. And challenge number 7, I'm sure, is a conditional again, right? So I'm going to copy that conditional, close that. Let's go to challenge number 7. On here, there's my blank challenge number 7. Paste my conditional, and let's get into doing this next one here. Challenge 7 says, ask the user how long on average they spend watching TV each day. If it is less than 2 hours, output that shouldn't rot your brain too much. If it's less than 4 hours per day, output aren't you getting square eyes? Otherwise, output fresh air beats channel flicking. Okay, so this one's going to be an if and an else statement, but it's also going to have an elif in there as well. And we're looking at integers instead of looking at strings, right? So we're asking about an integer. So let's do the pseudocode first, right? Pseudocode. We're going to get an input from the user, and the input from the user we want to store into a variable. So we're going to call our variable hours, because we can call our variable anything, remember. Single equals sign means we're going to be inputting information into there or storing information in there. Input. Here's our question. How many hours do you watch TV? Question mark space. All right, so that's our first line done. Ask the user how long on average they spend watching TV. All right, so we've asked our user how many hours do you watch TV. We could put per day, or that's okay. We'll just leave it like that. Now the next thing, if the user is less than 2 hours, Okay, so let's start our conditional statement. Hash if hours are less than 2, so I've used a less than sign in there, right? So if hours are less than 2, then we're going to do something. Okay, so let's write that. Let's write if hours are less than 2, then, because that's our IGCSE pseudocode, then what are we going to do? We're going to print out, that shouldn't rot your brain too much. Okay, so let's output. That shouldn't rot your brain too much. Okay, so we've done our simple first one. If it's less than 2 hours, output that shouldn't rot your brain too much. If it's less than 4 hours, output aren't you getting square eyes? So in here, we're going to add an elif. So it's not an else, it's an elif. It's sort of another if statement, but it's still within that first condition, right? So elif, so it's like an else if hours are less than 4, then we're going to do something different. And the other thing I forgot to do there is that should be indented a little bit because that's inside that first if. So here, let's indent output. And this time what we're going to output is, aren't you getting square eyes? right? So now if they've got less than 4 hours per day, aren't you getting square eyes? And then else, remember else, we don't need the condition. We can just do what it is we need to do, which is going to be output. And the output here is fresh air beats channel flicking. Okay, so we've basically done the program here in pseudocode. We've got the user to input how many hours do they have. If the hours are less than 2 hours, then it should say that shouldn't rot your brain too much. If the hours are less than 4 hours, then you're going to get aren't you getting square eyes. Else you're going to get fresh air beats channel flicking. Now there's a bit of a problem here. I think there's a bit of a problem here. And the problem's going to be that if the user puts in 1 or less than 1 hour, yeah, sure, that's fine. But then if they put in, say, 2, isn't 2 also less than 4? Or 1 is also less than 4, but it's also less than 1. So in theory, they should be printing both of those. So we kind of need a statement into here to say, if the hours are less than 4, but also they're more than this 2 hours here, because otherwise it's going to print that one out. So I might do something like, if hours are greater than or equal to 2 and the hours are less than 4. So we might put in here, hours are greater than or equal to 2 and, okay, so by changing that statement in there, I'm saying the first 2 hours fall into this category, the next 2 hours fall into this category, and anything else, anything above that will go into this section here. Okay, so just by putting greater than, hours are bigger than or equal to 2, and the hours are less than 4, then you're going to get this answer here. Otherwise, we're going to have this fresh air beats channel flicking. Okay, so I think I've got that right. So let's try and do this in Python and see if we can run that. Now, let's do pretty much exactly that line. So let's just copy that, Command C, Command V, there's our input line. Let's do our if statements down here. Remember, these don't need to be in uppercase like they are for pseudocode. So we're going to do if hours is less than 2, colon, return. Then we're going to do our first output statement, which is going to be print. And I'm just going to copy that so I don't have to type it all again. Okay, so that one's done. Then we do the elif. And this time we do need to say, and I'm going to copy that too because we've already done it in the pseudocode, so it should be all right. If hours are less than or equal to, no, hours are greater than or equal to 2, and the hours are, okay, so that looks like that's okay to me. 2, 4, colon, return. Now let's do the print statement. Okay, and the print statement, I'm just going to copy it again, that's easier. Okay, and then let's just do our else last. Now else is going to be the same thing, a print of this. Okay. So now let's have a look. If hours are less than or equal to 2 and hours are, I'm not sure and is the right thing in there, like that. It should be lowercase. There we go. There's a lowercase and in there. So now we should have this program running fine. Let's save it. Let's run it and test it and see if we've got any errors. Okay, so we've got the word input. Because I put in here input in uppercase. It should be in lowercase. This is good. Quite often seeing an error in your code is not a problem. It helps you go through and learn what the errors are and fix them. So here it said to me, input is not defined. So it told me the error. It told me where it was, line 20 of the code. And it says input's the problem, input's the error. So I went to here and I changed it to a correct input statement. Save it again, run it again. Okay, how many hours do you watch TV? Let's say do 1, and so it should say that shouldn't rot your brain too much. Okay, so I've entered a number, an integer here. It's expecting an integer, but I've only got a string input. So again, seeing the error has really helped me here. It's saying you needed an integer, not a string. So I'm going to go back to my code here, and I'm going to put in int, bracket, close my other bracket at this end. So now I've got an integer input, save that, run my code, run. How many hours do I watch TV? 1 hour. That shouldn't rot your brain too much. Let's run it again. This time it's saying, how many hours do you watch TV? I'm going to put in 2 exactly, because this should take me to the second group. And it should say, aren't you getting square eyes? All right, it does that. I'm going to run it again and test it again. Run module. 3, enter. Okay, aren't you getting square eyes? That worked. And let's run it the last time and do more than 4 hours, right? Or 4 hours exactly. Run module, let's do 4 hours. And it says fresh air beats channel flicking. So we've gone through and we've completed this next challenge. That one was a little bit more difficult, and we had a few little errors in there that we needed to fix. But like I said, it's quite good to get errors because you read through the errors, you can work out what they are in your program, you can go through and fix it. That's a conditional statement using if, elif, and else. Let's close that. Let's open number 8. Okay, here we are at challenge number 8. Now, challenge number 8 says, write a program that converts the output and converts and outputs marks into grades using the following data. So if you get a grade that's greater than or equal to 75, you get an A. Greater than or equal to 60, you get a B. Greater than or equal to 35, you get a C. Less than 35, you get a D. So this is actually really similar to the question we just had. It's got a conditional statement, it's got 2 elifs inside of it, and actually the converting is just you're getting an integer input, but you're outputting a string, right? So it's not such a hard question, this one. Let's go and open question challenge number 8. Let's write the pseudocode for this, and then let's get the Python working as well. Okay, conditional, challenge number 8, pseudocode. And let's start with our simple input. Here. Input, and we're going to call this input mark. So we're going to give it the name variable mark equals input, in brackets, please enter the score. Now, like we did in the last challenge, and I forgot to do this, this is going to be an integer. So let's put an int at the start, bracket, input. So we know this one is an integer being input. So it's an input that's going to be a mark out of, I don't know, whatever it's out of, but it's up to 75 that we're going to know. Now, we're going to do a pseudocode. We're going to do a conditional statement. So I'm just going to actually write a couple of these to start with, so that I remember to do them the right way. Okay, so we're going to start with an if in here, capital letters. It's going to have the word then we're going to have an elif, and then that should have a then after it as well. Then we're probably going to have another elif, and then we're going to have a then we're going to have another, this one's going to be an else, and then at the end of all of that we need to have an end if. I'm not sure if I did an end if on the last one, but end if can be in there. Now, let's go through and start to do this. If mark is exactly equal, I'm using 2 equal signs, greater than or equal to 75. No, so if mark is, let's do greater than or equal to 75, and we don't need the inverted commas because it's an integer, not a string, then something's going to happen. And what are we going to have happen here? We're going to have a grade output. So we're going to output, and we're going to output just an A. So let's do A, and in fact I'm going to copy that line because each time we're going to have an output, so I might as well just copy that exact line and do that after each then statement. Okay, so one of them is going to be a B. One of them is going to be a C, and one of them is going to be a D. You don't want to be getting the D. Okay. Now, so the first one, if the mark is greater than or equal to 75, you get an A. On the LF, if the mark is greater than or equal to 60, greater than or equal to 60, now we're going to add something to this, and the mark is less than 75, because we don't want, if it goes into the 75, we want it in the A area. We don't want it in the B area, right? So if the mark is greater than 60 and the mark is less than 75, then we're going to output you got a B. Now I'm going to copy that statement there. I'm going to go down and do the next for elif and just change the numbers. So if the mark is greater than 35 and the mark is less than 60, then they got a C. And then for the last one, anything less than 35 should fall into the D category. I don't need to put the condition in. So I've actually done it. That's it. We finished this program. It was super quick. I just want to go through and check the logic in the pseudocode first. So the logic is the user inputs a mark as an integer and it's please enter your score. If the mark is greater than or equal to 75, then it's going to output an A. If the mark is greater than or equal to 60 and the mark is less than 75, it's going to output a B. If the mark is greater than or equal to 35 but less than 60, it's going to output a C, and anything else is going to give you a D. Okay, so I think that's right. We did this one super quickly. Let's try and do this with Python. Okay, and let's start just pretty much copying and pasting our pseudocode and just making a few little changes to make sure it's the right Python format, so that we need to change this int to be a lowercase int. We need to change the word input into input in lowercase. Now that is Python ready. Then let's do our if statement, and remember our if statement can be the same except it's not capital letters, it's lowercase, and we put a colon at the end. And our output isn't the word output, it is the word print. But we can just copy and paste that. Okay, so we've done that. Now, the next line is elif, lowercase, and we can copy and paste from our pseudocode here. And we put a colon at the end. Remember the word and needs to be lowercase. Okay, so that looks like it's going to work. Then we're going to do print, brackets, inverted commas, B, close inverted commas, close brackets. Right, let's do another elif, mark. Let's just copy and paste from here. Paste, there we go. Change the and put a colon at the end. Then we're going to do print, bracket, inverted commas, C, brackets, and then let's do else, colon, mark, print, D. Okay, so that was a super quick program, probably because we just did challenge 7, it was pretty easy. Challenge 8 seems to be much better. So let's hit save, let's run it and check if we made any errors. Okay, please enter a score. The score I'm going to enter is, let's go for 77. And prints out, I got an A. Fantastic. Now, see how I don't like the word score is hard up against the 77 there? I want there to be a space. So, in fact, in here, I'm going to go to my code and I'm just going to put a colon space. And that way the user knows that that's where they're going to enter it in. Because what I don't want is the user to press space, because that's not going to register in our program. So I'm going to put the space in to start with. Right, let's run it again. This time, let's give it a mark of, 68. Save that. Let's put in 68, enter, and it gave me a B. Let's run it again. Run module. This time, let's give them a 34, which gave me a D. And what do I want in here? Let's give it a 50, so to run the middle one. Run module. Let's give it a 50. Okay, so that's it. Our program number 8 works. We've written a conditional statement that has 3 different options and gives us a mark A, B, C, or D. Okay, close out of that. Let's open up number 9. Challenge number 9. Challenge number 9, write a program that asks the user to name one of the Olympic values: respect, excellence, or friendship. If they answer correctly, output that's correct. Otherwise, try again. Now, this is going to be a conditional loop, right? So that if they get the condition correct, the loop ends. If they get the condition incorrect, then the loop will continue to run. Okay, so we're going to use a loop this time, so the program will continue running over and over and over again. So let's go to challenge number 9. Here we go. Let's put in here conditional loop. Okay, and we want to have our 3 values. What are our 3 values? They are respect, excellence, and friendship. So let's ask the user using pseudocode to input a value. So let's call it value equals, and remember we're doing pseudocode to start with, so I'm putting a hash in, value equals input, please enter an Olympic value. Okay, is that what it is? Olympic value? Yep, okay. Please enter an Olympic value. So that's pretty simple. Now, we want to see if that value is going to be one of the correct values. Otherwise, we want it to try again. Now, to get this to try again, to get it to loop, I'm actually going to use another variable, and this variable is going to be a Boolean decision, a true or false. Okay, so I'm just going to put in here again equals, and I'm going to put true. Okay, so I've created a variable in here called again, and I've put in the Boolean value called true. Okay, so this is how we're going to do this. We're going to create a loop, and we're going to create a while loop. I'm going to say while again is exactly equal to true. So I'm saying while this value of again is true, we're going to keep doing this loop. All right, so I'm saying while again is exactly equal to true. This is comparing the two. While it's exactly equal to true, we're going to do the loop. Now, inside the loop, we're going to use our if conditional statement. And I'll show you how we do this. We're going to say if the value the user input is exactly equal to, and we want it to be exactly equal to respect, inverted commas, or the value is exactly equal to excellence, or the value is equal to friendship. So if they get it exactly right, if the value that they've input is equal to either respect or excellence or friendship, if it's one of those, we're going to say that's correct, and the program is going to end, right? So we're going to output brackets, inverted commas, that's correct. And we want the program to end. So how do we make this loop end? The only way we can make this loop end is if we then say this again here would then have to be false, so the loop wouldn't run. Okay, so at the moment, again is still true, so the loop's going to run. So if they get it correct, we're going to say again is now equal to single equal false. So now what we're saying is that at the start, again was equal to true, so this loop's going to run. But if they get it correct, again equals false, so the loop's not going to run anymore, so the loop will be finished. Now, there's a couple of little mistakes here. First of all, I've got true in lowercase there and true in uppercase there, so I'm going to make that true in lowercase, so that's the same. Now, here's the problem with this program. We've got a little bit of an issue with this program as it runs right now, and this is it. When the program runs, we ask the user to input a value, and then we start this loop. The problem is we never ask the user again to input a value. So if they get it wrong, they're never getting to input a value again. So what we actually need to do is get this line here, cut this, and we need to put that inside our while loop. So now the only variable outside is our true, our Boolean statement. Our loop starts, then our loop asks what the Olympic value is. If they get it correct, then the loop will finish and the program will end. If they don't get it correct, so I could put an else here, and if they don't get it correct, it'll go back and loop again. But I don't even need the else there. It's either they get it right or they don't. And if they don't, the loop will continue. So this is essentially a conditional loop. The loop will continue until they get the condition right, which then breaks the loop and the loop finishes. I think the best thing to do for this one is to actually see it in Python and see it running. So let's do this in Python. Okay, and we're going to start with our variable. I'm going to call this again equals true. Now, true has to have a capital T, right? So if you write true with a lowercase t, it won't work. You'll know by the color, okay? So you'll know by the color there. Oh, and the other thing in our pseudocode is we need to put in here an end while. For IGCSE, they use end while as well, okay? So just put that in for our pseudocode. Right, so now let's go down to here. While, again, is exactly equal to true. Then what's going to happen? What's going to happen is we're going to ask the user to input, please input a value. So let's copy that, paste that, change the word input to lowercase. Okay, and then let's run our if statement. If value is exactly equal to, and I'm just actually going to copy that line there because that line should be correct, except I've written friendship instead of friendship. Friendship, there we go. Okay, these ors need to be lowercase. So one of the interesting footnotes that you'll notice here is IGCSE use uppercase letters for a lot of these, whereas Python uses lowercase. When you get to the IB, the International Baccalaureate use lowercase for everything in their pseudocode so that the code is easy to copy over and change. So I think the IGCSE way to do it is a little bit strange that they do it in capital letters, but for Python, it's just the way they do it. So print in here, that's correct. Okay, and then we're going to put in here, if they've got it correct, again, is going to equal false with a capital letter. Okay, so let's go through and try and run this, and we just want to try and talk through this again one more time as I run it. Let's go run module. Missing a colon somewhere. Okay, I'm missing a colon at the end of my if statement. Right, there we go. Command S, run it again. Okay, please enter an Olympic value. I'm going to write food. So that should be wrong. So it should ask me to enter an Olympic value again. Okay, so I'll show you what happened. Went down here, I put the word food in. Food wasn't one of these ones. So the loop didn't break. The loop went back to the start and started again. Please enter an Olympic value. Right, so let's put another Olympic value in. Cars. Again, it didn't work. All right, so now let's put in one of these real ones. Let's put in respect. And it says that's correct, and the program ends. So if you get it correct, so this is the if statement. If you get it correct, it'll say that's correct, and it'll break the loop. It'll change the Boolean value to false. The loop will end. If you don't get it correct, the again stays true, and it'll just keep going over and over again until you get one that's correct. Okay, so that's it. That's challenge number 9. That's finished. Now we're going to move on to challenge 10. Now challenge 10 is a longer challenge, so I'll break here for a second, and then we'll start the video again, and it has a lot more to it, the next challenge. Okay, so here we are at challenge number 10. We're going to go through and read this challenge. Now this challenge says, write a game that allows the user to play rock, paper, scissors against the computer
must display the computer's choice and show the results of the game. The computer's answers must be random. Now, this is important, this little section down here. It says the computer's answers must be random, because that means we now need to use a module in Python that allows us to do random. And to get that module, what we actually do is we import the module into our into our Python program. It's a module that's really commonly used all the time in Python, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. Now, as per usual, we're going to write this in Python first, and there's a few things. We've got to make a rock, paper, scissors section first, that the computer makes a decision, and then we've got to have the user make a decision about the rock, paper, scissors as well, and then we're going to compare those two decisions. So this is a much more complex question than the first 9. So let's go through and work on this. And in actual fact, if you've completed the first 9, this one, you can use pretty much everything you've used so far to complete this question here, right? So let's go through, let's start with the pseudocode. So the very first thing that we want to do is that we want to make sure that we're using IGCSE pseudocode, and we want to allow the user to play rock, paper, scissors against the computer. Now, let's talk about this importing this random. So what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to write import from random. And in fact, I'm going to import randint from random. Okay, so this is saying import the randint module from the program, or from the module called random, right? So it's import this function called randint from random. Now, I haven't got it in pseudocode yet, so I'm going to actually put a little hash at the start there. So it's going to be import randint from random. So randint is a random integer. So you can choose any integer you want. It's going to be a random integer, and it's from this module called random, right? So that's what we're going to do first, is we're going to have to import that. Now, we're going to have the computer randomly generate a number between, I don't know, 1 and 3. So 1 could be rock, paper, 2 could be paper, and 3 could be scissors. So what we would do is we actually would create a variable, and we could call this variable something like computer. So the computer's making a selection. So we're going to have a variable called computer, and that's going to equal a random integer, and I'm going to say 0,2. So now the reason I've said 0,2 is that there are 3 options there. The option of the number 0, the number 1, and then the number 2. And I'm going to make them align with rock, paper, and scissors for the computer. So this is going to be the computer's selection. It's going to be a random number, 0, 1, or 2. So if the computer's making that selection, I need essentially an if statement. So let's do this again in here. So let's put if. Now remember, I'm using IGCSE pseudocode, so I'm using a capital F, and we're going to have a then statement, and then we're going to have an end if, and we're probably going to need a couple of else's in here as well, and elifs. So let's go through and put a few hashes in so that my pseudocode will kind of work, right? So let's put a then. Let's go down to the bottom and put an end if, because I've got to remember to do that one in pseudocode. In here, we're going to have an else. And then we just, let's make that an elif. Then let's have an else. And in fact, actual fact, we probably should put a elif with a then in there as well. So that should be the right setup for our computer to generate its own decision, whether it's a rock, paper, or a scissors. Okay, so now let's put in the conditions. And the first condition here is going to be if the variable computer is exactly equal, so I'm using 2 equal signs, to, let's say, the number 0, then what are we going to do? Then let's say, let's make a variable, let's call it computer select, comp select, equals, and it's going to equal a string letter, and the string is going to be rock. Okay, so if you understand this logic here, if the random integer generated by the computer is a 0, then computer select, this is what the computer is going to select, it's going to select the word rock. So that's what it's going to be selected. Then we can go down to elif, and if the computer random number was equal to 1, then we're going to say, okay, we're going to say comp select. Comp select is just another variable that I just created saying that the computer has made a selection. So comp select is going to equal paper. And finally, in the else section here, so if it's not 1 and it's not 0, then it must be the 2. So I don't need to write in the argument in there. All I need to do is put in comp select is equals, and it's going to equal scissors. Okay, so now the computer has made their selection. So we've got this little random integer being generated from the program called random. The integer then aligns with either a rock, a paper, or a scissors. So if it's a 0, it's a rock. 1, it's going to be a paper. And if it's a 2, it's going to equal scissors. So the computer has made their selection. So if we look back at our program, it says allow the user to play rock, paper, scissors against the computer. So that means the user is going to want to make a selection. Must display the computer's choice. Well, we can do that with an output statement and to show the results of the game. But for this to work, we have to get the user to input some information. So let's do an input statement. And remember, we want to save that. So let's call this user equals input. And let's tell them what to do. Please select rock, paper, or scissors. Okay, now they're going to select rock, paper, or scissors, and they can write the word rock, paper, or scissors. If you wanted to give them more instructions, you could do that, but simply, well, let's just say rock, paper, or scissors, because that's what it asks you to do. The program doesn't say make anything super complex, it just says the user has to play against the computer. Okay, so now we've got the user's made an input, they've chosen rock, paper, or scissors. Now it says we have to show the computer's choice. So let's do an output here and show what the computer chose. So let's go output. And what we're going to say? We're going to say, inverted commas, the computer selected. And then we put a comma and we put the variable name for the computer, which was computer select. All right, so that's going to show what the computer selected. Remember, if the random integer was a 0, the computer selected rock. If the random integer was a 1, the computer selected paper, and anything else, the computer selected scissors. So we're outputting and we're telling the user which one the computer selected. Now we need to compare the two and work out who won the game. All right, now this is going to be another whole section here. So we've kind of got 3 sections to this one question. It's a little bit complicated. Now we're going to use another if statement, another conditional statement to see if something happened or if something else happened. And I'm actually just going to put a whole pile of hashes in here because I know that there's going to be a fair bit of coding in here to work out who won and who didn't win and all that sort of stuff with rock, paper, scissors. Now, of course, you need to know the game rock, paper, scissors for this to work, right? So let's have a look. If what the user selected is exactly the same as what the computer selected, comp select, then essentially it's a draw. So we're going to output here, we're going to output draw. Okay, so if you both selected the same thing, 2 people selected rock, or 2 people selected scissors, or 2 people selected paper, then we know that it's going to be a draw. So that's the easiest one first. If the user is exactly the same as the computer, we're going to output draw. Now, let's get some elifs in here. If, let's go elif, if the user is exactly equal to, let's say, rock. So if the user is equal to rock and the comp select is exactly equal to, what does rock beat? Rock beats scissors. So let's go in here. Scissors. And we probably should be putting in thens in here. Then what's going to happen? We're going to output. What are we outputting? We're outputting the user wins. So let's output you win. Okay, so if you chose rock and the paper and the computer selected scissors, then you win. All right, let's see how other way would you win. Let's go elif. The user selected inverted commas. Let's say the user selected scissors, and the computer comp select. Let's say they selected, what else? What does scissors beat? Scissors beats paper. So then we're going to do exactly these two lines again. So we just copy that, paste that into there. Then you're going to win. Okay, so if you chose scissors and the computer selected paper, you won. Okay, so let's try the last combination where you would win. If the user selected paper and the comp select must have chosen, if you've got paper, must have chosen rock, then we're going to do again, you've won again. So they're the three possible ways that you could have won, right? So if you chose rock and the computer chose scissors, you won. If you chose scissors and the computer chose paper, you won. If you chose paper and the computer selected rock, you won. Everything else, you're going to lose. So let's just do that with a simple else statement. Let's go to here, let's put else, and let's put our hash. Let's put output, in brackets, inverted commas, the computer wins. Okay, so that's it. We've actually worked it out. We've done the logic and we've made sure that that actually goes through and works. So we could just check our program again, our pseudocode before we get started. We're importing random integer from random. We've then made the computer create a random number. We've then chosen those numbers and allocated rock to 0, paper to 1, and scissors to 2. Then we've got the user to choose rock, paper, or scissors. And we've output what the computer selected. So the user's going to see their answer. They're going to see what the computer selected. Then we've gone through and said, if you got the same, it's a draw. If you got rock and the computer got scissors, then you win. If you got scissors and the computer got paper, you win. If you got paper and the computer selected rock, you win. Otherwise, all the other combinations, the computer wins. So that looks like good code to me. That looks like, in terms of pseudocode, that looks pretty good. Now, what I'm going to do to write the Python code is I'm actually just going to copy the whole lot, Command C. I'm going to whack a couple of returns in here, and I'll put in my hash to say, here's the Python section. And the beauty of pseudocode is it's pretty close to Python. So if I'm now going to go through and make some changes here, I'm not really making many changes. I get rid of the hash there, and then that line is actually correct. I get rid of the hash there, that line is correct. I get rid of the hash here, and I have to change the if to lowercase, and I have to put a colon at the end, and then that's going to be correct. We don't use then in Python, so we're going to get rid of that. We're going to do comp select, and we're actually going to have that tabbed in because it has to be tabbed in inside the if statement. The elif, lowercase, same thing. Put in elif here, space, and then we need to make sure there's a colon at the end. We can go down, get rid of the then. Get rid of that. Go down, get rid of this, and make sure that's tabbed in. Remember, if this condition is met, we're going to rock. If this condition is met, we're going to paper. So we need to make sure that those conditions are written the correct way. Else, colon, comp select here equals scissors. So that's it. And we don't need that end if there because we don't use an end if in Python. Right, now we're going to get our user, and there's our user input. And remember, the word input needs to be in lowercase, and it changes purple so that you know that it's correct. Now, it's going to be a string, so we don't have to put the word integer at the start, and they're either going to select rock, paper, or scissors. Now, output, we don't use the word output in Python, we use the word print, so that's going to print what the computer selected. So far, so good. Now let's go down and do the same for this section of pseudocode. Let's change it to real Python code. If the user selected equals the computer selected, then we're going to output draw. Remember, output is print, and that needs to be indented because that's inside that condition. Let's go to here, elif user, equals rock and computer select equals scissors. Now you'll notice there that the and went orange straight away. That's because I did a lowercase and I probably should have in my pseudocode made that an uppercase and, but that's okay for the purpose of understanding how this works. As long as you know that in pseudocode that should be an uppercase, then there's no problem. In fact, we could go back and change that later if we really needed to. Right, I'm going to do this next elif. So all I'm doing now essentially is converting my pseudocode into proper Python code, and that's just a matter of knowing the right syntax, knowing the right way that Python is written, and that really comes with a lot of practice. So if you've done challenges 1 through 9, then you're already starting to get some good practice in for how to write Python. So elif user equals paper and computer select equals rock. Then guess what? I win again. So that's good. Let's just check that. Print. Make sure that's tabbed in because that's inside that conditional elif just there. And otherwise, last but not least, else. If I didn't win, then obviously the computer wins, right? So I'm going to print, put tab in there. So that's it. I think our computer game is done. We're going to call this rock, paper, scissors. I'm going to go through and change these ands to capitals because really in pseudocode they should have been capitals. So I want to make sure that I'm doing or modeling the correct way that you should be working. So that's the way it should be worked. And I forgot to put an end if down here. So let's put end if down there for that. So that should be right. So we've got our if and end if. We've got our inputs. So our pseudocode's correct. I think our Python's correct. Let's run it and see if we're right. So let's go run module. Okay, did you mean from? Oh, okay. So let's go from random import rand int. Got that one around the wrong way a little bit. So from random import rand int. Let's change that as well in here. In our pseudocode to make sure we get that around the right way. From random import randint. Okay, so that's better. From random import randint. So this is why. And when you get errors, it's really good. You learn from your mistakes and you remember next time to get it correct. All right, so let's try this again. Run. Okay, please select rock, paper, or scissors. So I'm going to select rock. The computer selected rock, therefore we got a draw. That's great, that works. So let's run it again. And this time I'll select something different. I'm going to select paper. The computer selected paper. Wow, I've got a draw 2 times in a row. I wonder what the chances of that are. Let's choose paper again then. The computer selected scissors. The computer wins. Now let's do the logic and see if that works. Does scissors beat paper? Well, yes, it does. So the computer wins. So that's good. That actually worked. Now, obviously, you need to run this program about 10 times. I don't know, so that you can check every single possible option. I chose rock. The computer selected paper. Paper covers rock, so the computer wins. Gee, I'd like to beat the computer just once. That would be great. Let's try scissors. Okay, what's wrong here? Did you mean computer select? So this is good. We actually now you can see here I've made a typo in there, and this is why we run our programs over and again, because this is called beta testing when you're testing your program, and you want to make sure that you don't have any errors in there. In fact, this is called alpha testing because you're the first person testing it. So it's alpha testing. Beta testing is when someone else does it. So now I need to go down here and find where I'd written comp select. There it is, right there. So I needed to actually fix that. I made a little typo. So again, good that we get errors because they help us fix things. Let's run it again. I'm going to select scissors. Hit enter. The computer selected paper. You win. Finally, I beat the computer. Right, so that's it. Now, one of the things that you might ask is, well, why don't you just loop it so you don't have to run it each time? That's not one of the questions of the challenge. The challenge doesn't say, can you loop this program so that it runs over and over and over again? It doesn't ask me to do that. If I wanted to do that, we could put in a Boolean value at the top. We could make that value true. And then after each game, we could say, do you want to play again? And if the user says yes, then we do nothing. If the user says no, then we change that Boolean value from true to false and the program would end. Now you could do that, but it's not one of the requirements. And I think that's important to think about when you think about your IGCSE exams. You only need to fulfill the requirements. A lot of students get hung up on writing better programs than they're actually being asked for. You only need to write a program as good as you're being asked to write. So that's what it is. That's the finish of number 10. That's a nice little program there. That one took a little bit longer, but now you've got yourself a rock, paper, scissors game. You could tweak it. You could, like I said, put a loop in and make it run again, and you've got yourself a nice little computer game. The next video, we'll look at challenges 11 through 15. They're not as complex as this one. They're a little bit easier. They're just using a few new functions that we haven't used yet. Right? Thank you. See you in the next video.